I have been told that there is a scale out front, and before you leave, you have to weigh in to see if you have become less or more healthy in this time. So, seriously, do we feel full? I sense we feel full physically and emotionally, spiritually. It's been such a good time to be with you all. So before I say anything else, I just want to thank you for making the time to come and be in this space. It has been such a rich time, and conversing with you all, being together, learning with you all, hearing slices of your life, has been such a joyful experience, and I feel like I learned so much in each conversation with you. I'm grateful for that. And in the midst of all of that, this time really is for you. And I have a great sense of the significance of the journey that you're on, the significance of your life that comes by grace, the cycle of grace, but just the significance of this portion of the journey that has you in a next frontiers mode. What is next for us? I'm very aware that you're ready to go now, and packing up things and making sure you get to the airport on time and trying to figure out how you're going to do a red-eye flight, that sort of stuff. So my promise here is to not give you a whole lot of content. I think it will be the case that everything that you hear, you will find is intuitively true and simple to you. But I think it will be meaningful if you take it and move with it. My aim really is, as you are going from this place, which has been such a rich time, and as you move through this year in your next frontiers mode, that you have everything that you need to make the journey in the most fruitful way possible. The idea of a next frontier, it's a compelling picture, big sky, great horizons, new challenges, and I hope and pray that for all of you, and have a deep sense of confidence that God has something in store for you, more soul satisfying than you can imagine. It is also the case in our national history, and I suppose in the world history, that next frontiers, getting to a next frontier, is a treacherous thing. It's a dangerous journey. There are challenges outside, but also challenges within. That's sort of the American story of the frontier, encountering difference in the world, misinterpreting things, living out of our worst selves. And so how we move through a journey to a next frontier is extraordinarily significant. A handful of years ago, I came across a poem that I think is a great next frontiers poem. It's about the transitions of life. Rare for me to pull out a poem. I was a microbiology major, so I mostly read Cliff's Notes about poems, other people's interpretations. But this one I actually do like and have found meaningful and have been meditating on and talking about with friends for at least 5 years. So this poem is by T.S. Eliot, who in the early part of his poetry writing was a great nihilist, sort of deep, serious, hopeless soul who found some sort of brand of faith along the way, reflected in many of his poems, reflected in this one as well. I'll apologize at the beginning for the gendered reference. He's speaking of old men, people in midlife transition. We'll embrace it here today as older men and women. People in transition, Eliot says, ought to be explorers. Here or there does not matter. We must be still and still moving into another intensity for a further union, a deeper communion through the dark cold and the empty desolation. The wave cry, the wind cry, the vast waters of the petrel and the porpoise. In the end is my beginning. I don't know about you, and maybe you need to think about it long, but I feel like there's like a prophetic sort of call to us in these words. You can decide whether that feels true to you as well. But I hear Eliot saying to us that in the journeys of our lives and the transitions of midlife, there's an invitation to freedom. The call to explore here or there does not matter. We don't have to get wound up about arriving at just the exact right place, that the goodness and grace of God is broad enough to welcome our longings, to welcome our exploration, to lead us with a sense of hope and wonder in who we are and who we are becoming, what we might have to contribute to God's great kingdom through our small and imperfect gifts. Eliot, in the middle part of this stanza of the poem, assures us that in the midst of our exploration, there's an intensity, a union, and a deep communion that God has in store for us. In American leadership, there's things to accomplish, and we're breaking barriers outside of us. And I suppose if we do that to the glory of God, that's a fantastic thing. Eliot here talking about a deeper kind of barrier breaking that God has in store for us. And Mimi and Trevor and others have been just teaching about that deeper communion that God has called us all to, and without which we never really become what it is that is our best gift to the world. And then there's a sobering part at the end. You know, it's possible in sort of like the American optimistic spirit to just think that everything is up and to the right and we're growing and influencing more people and it's all going to be fantastic. And it will be fantastic because all shall be well. But Eliot is sobering in the sense that he's telling us that the journey of our exploration, the further communion, the deeper communion, also potentially involves a desolation for us. There are parts of the journey that we would not have written into the story if we were the authors of the story. There are losses and pains to undergo. And I think he's saying at the end that the beginning that we hope for will not really ever come to us in its fullness if we do not embrace some ends in our lives. There are crucifixions that we must undergo. There are things that have to come to an end in our vocation. There are things that have to come to an end in our character, in our inner being. And that takes grace and courage. So the question that I have often asked, and I want to ask us to ponder all together, is how will we sustain our journey into all that Eliot is talking about here? Into the deep union and communion that's in store, into the exploration that's ahead through the valley of desolation, through the things that feel dark and intimidating to the human soul. Well, that's an enormous question, but one of the things that I think is important is the gift of friendship, the quality of our relationships with the most important people in our lives. So that's why in your outline, this is called a call to come alive to spiritual friendship. This topic is not completely distinct from other things that Trevor and Andrew just got done talking about, but I think it sort of brings it to a point. Mark chapter 12, the scribes come to Jesus asking him what the greatest commandment is, and you all know because you're preaching people that Jesus vexes them. He tells them to the question of what is most important, I have two answers for you. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then the second one is much like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus saying that the invitation to abide with Christ is inextricably wound up with the kind of relationships that we have with one another. These two are bound up with one another. A wise person said The divine friendship enhances our friendships with one another. And human friendships have the potential to make God's friendship feel more real. That's good news to those of us who are Myers-Briggs SJ concretist types. Mimi and all her mystical encounters. I long for that, but I'm a simple soul, who's looking for someone to reflect something back to me. I need help along the way. And you find these words from Trevor in Beyond Loneliness. Trevor is clear in this quote that the divine friendship is most central, and that our friendships with one another can never be a substitute for the divine friendship, but they are an authentic help. Or maybe another metaphor, word picture we could use, is that they are the genuine fruit of a life with God. They're the fruit, they're the gift of a life with God, or the sign of a life with God. The love of God in us overflowing into a distinctive quality of relationship with other people. Or maybe it would help us to turn that phrasing around and ask the question, is it possible for a person to be immersed in the divine life, to be anchored in friendship with the Trinity, and not be formed as a person who is capable of sustaining healthy, satisfying friendships? Some of you have supervised other people, or you're just wise, observant souls. My experience in ministry tells me that the person on your team or in your circle of concern, the person on your team who is a gifted person and who is an effective person who cannot sustain healthy friendships, that inevitably is a dangerous person. That's a person that's prone to abuse power. So we should watch out for that. Gary's quote in Trevor's book says that most of us become aware of a friendship-shaped hole in our lives. We all long for friendship. We don't just long for accomplishment, though we want that as well. We all long for friendship. So I want to begin with a question and just put you in pairs to chat about it a little bit, but on a human level, to what extent is the friendship-shaped hole in your life full in this season? To what extent is the friendship-shaped hole in your life full in this season? Just take a moment and turn in pairs. And that's kind of a big question, so maybe we could confine it just by saying, who are 2 or 3 of the significant friends in your life? And what words come to your mind when you think about those friends? We're just going to take about 3 minutes to do this. So turn in pairs, start chatting, then I'll call us back.
Yeah, oh yeah, sorry. You want me to go? Oh, okay.
All right, we are going fast, so move through give someone else a chance to share. Let's just take one more minute. One more minute. All right, let's gather back. I wonder, very briefly, when you think about some of the meaningful friends in your life, what words came into your mind? Just out of curiosity. What words came into your mind when you think about these friends?
No pretense.
No pretense. That's awesome. What else?
Walk together.
You walk together.
Not literally.
No judgment.
Walking together through lots of life's bumps.
Walking together through lots of life bumps. Well, you could do it literally as well. That would be good. Any other, what other words came to your mind?
Ease.
What's that?
Ease.
Ease?
Like there's an ease about our friendship.
Okay. You just
It's
not striving to make this happen. It has a momentum and energy of its own. That's a gift, isn't it? Mutuality. The great sense that there is something that we have to offer to one another. And it's not too one-sided. It's meaningful. Mary?
For you, and we share a great deal of laughter.
Okay. Yeah, laughter and a deep sense of confidence that this person is for you. That's so important, isn't it?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
In the laughter, I would say tears and anger.
Yeah. Tears, I think, would be intuitive to people, the freedom to come undone with one another, even when you don't quite feel ready to come undone. The person who creates enough space and safety to hold you together so that you can come undone. Anger might be slightly less intuitive to people, so say a word about why you say that.
Oh, I don't think it would make sense to say laughter and not say anger in the same sentence. The human experience, there must be congruence on both ends of the spectrum of how we
Okay.
interact with one another, and the freedom to go on the full dance with one another through the carnival of emotions that we all experience, and have someone to share those emotions with you.
Yeah. So the full range. There's this sense in which we're not bifurcating our lives and only giving to someone the nice parts. We are. The cleaned up, we've sterilized. It's like there is some other part of me that's raw. That may not even be right today. And would I let that part be exposed? Maybe corrected, drawn out. Anything else that Bill wanted to?
just to piggyback off that though is forgiveness as well.
Yeah, the 9-ish person putting the anger back in the It's like, yes, anger and forgiveness. We have, it's okay. It's all gonna be okay. Thank you, Ted. No, it's true. I mean, the journey of it, that we are remaining together in that. Yeah. We could go on and on there, and I would encourage you to let your heart name what it is that feels like a gift to you in the friendships that you have, and to pay attention in this season about where those friendships are. Friendships, of course, are dynamic things. They're living things like plants. So it's not like we just have them and that's great and it's good. They change and we change. And so there's a constant sort of cultivation of friendships if they are to remain current and life-giving. I have a little more content to give, but before I wanted to introduce you to some of my most meaningful friends. These are people that, 3 of them I have known for about 42 years and have been friends and housemates that whole time. My brother I have known for longer than 42 years. I've known him for the full 60. So I will say more about these friends later on, but there has been the gift of friendship in coming to Christ together, the deep sharing of life together and of traveling the world and being on mission together, succeeding together, failing together, fighting together, having anger and forgiveness, But for now, I would just say it's like these are people who have shaped my life and helped me to become who I am, and they're people who have helped me sustain my vocation. So I'm quite sure that I wouldn't be here today without this set of people. And one of the interesting things to me is that, I really honestly would not have chosen a one of them to be my lifelong friends. At the outset, it was not the case. It was like, oh, this is just, of course, can we be best friends? This is the best. And we all just fell in together. My friend Bruce, the tall guy, very Caucasian, Nordic type soul. These people, have a tendency to be on the more blunt side. We Asian Americans, we have different types of personalities, but there's a more indirect, communicating, gracious way of being. And at the very beginning of what wasn't a friendship quite yet, I remember one occasion where we were at a conference ground together. We were young adult leaders at this thing. I was relatively early in my leadership journey. I didn't become a Christian till later, and so I didn't become a leader till later. And, I was maybe a little unsanctified. I remember there was one evening where the meal was served. It was a campground, not quite as nice as this. So there's food on the table, and they would bring out dessert. That one evening there was like ice cream bars, various kinds on a plate. They brought it to our table, and I took one and then passed it around, took it around. And then when we went out, we were heading off to our next thing, and my friend Bruce said, "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" He said, "I was observing you, and what you did back there seemed selfish to me. Because when the ice cream came, you took it and you took what you wanted before you offered anyone else the ice cream." And I thought, who in the world are you to talk about how selfish I am? Do you know how selfish you are? You're the really selfish person here. But I actually, even though we were at the beginning of our friendship, knew that what he said was true. I was pretty embarrassed, and so I just blurted out, "I'm so sorry. I didn't even think about it. I was just acting." And in that moment, it was a very easy thing. He just said, "I know that's not what you're mostly like, and I just want you to be, all that God has called you to be here." There really was, in his bluntness, this sense that he was just saying, I care about who you're becoming. I love all the best parts of you, and I see the not best parts of you, and I want you to come along. I wouldn't have chosen a one of these people, and they became meaningful friends in my life. And the intention in this setting here is to talk about how you might cultivate the gifts of people around you as well. So the aim of the session, just real briefly, is to cast a compelling vision for the importance of friendships in our flourishing, and to talk particularly about what spiritual friendship, what contours it might have, what elements are important in it, and then I'd like to, at the end, to persuade you to take some practical step that nurtures deeper spiritual friendship in your own life. Of course, friendship, the idea of friendship, always sounds nice, always sounds pretty good. There are challenges to friendship for people who are in midlife, for people who have families. Barbara Bradley Haggerty was an NPR religion reporter, very interesting person who was from a Christian Science background and became a devout Christian soul. In her book about midlife called Life Reimagined, she said, friendships at midlife are a little like smoke detectors. You need them in theory, but they can be a nuisance to keep up, especially if you're juggling children, aging parents, and a career, or she might say a ministry, or navigating a pandemic. They can be a nuisance to keep up, so you let them run out of juice. You don't really miss them until the house begins to burn and you wish you had a few firemen nearby. So Barbara Bradley Haggerty is being observant about the realities of midlife. We all have a good value system, but life is more complex than it was in some earlier season of our lives. And can we keep our eyes on the things that are most important to us, she says. I want to say the importance of deep, lasting friendship should be wholly unsurprising. First and foremost, to need good friends is profoundly Christ-like. When we think about the life of Jesus, I am moved by the idea that the image of the invisible God to us is the image of a good friend. Even to Jesus' enemies, he was known as the friend of sinners. That was an accusation, but it turned out to be the highest of compliments. Jesus could have ministered to Zacchaeus in any number of ways. He could have set him straight, set him on his way, and sanctified the man's life. He came to share a meal with him, to know his story, to heal his soul. Jesus said in John chapter 15, 16, in the upper room discourse toward the end of his life with his closest disciples, I want to make clear to you that you are not servants to me. I have called you to be my friends. I'm disclosing to you everything that's going on. He's disclosing to the disciples the purposes of God. So there's certainly that, and that kind of feels work-oriented. This is the mission. This is where we're going. But it's interesting to me that he is disclosing to them his soul in the midst of it. That on the journey to the cross, at the Passover dinner, in the Lucan version, he says to them, I have eagerly desired to eat this Passover with you. I desire you. I need you to be with me in this journey. He's disclosing to them the depth of his pain. That's the story of Gethsemane, right? Drawing Peter, James, and John into this space to say, stay here with me. I think we could paraphrase and to say, it's like, I need you. Can you hang with that in this season? It occurs to me that in the Gospel of John, in John 13, where Jesus is washing the disciples' feet, that there is that distinctive picture that in the synoptic Gospels, in that gathering, there is a communion service like we've had each evening here. And in John chapter 13, rather than a communion service, Jesus is telling his disciples, these bickering souls who had different politics and different personalities, he's saying, I'm leaving soon, and I want you to get down on your hands and knees and serve one another. And I think if we place that gospel picture alongside the synoptics, it's trying to give us a holistic picture to say that our relationships, the kinds of friendships that we have, are fundamentally to be sacramental. They are to be the means of God's grace to one another. To be Christ-like is to have the capacity, the instinct, the appetite to nurture friends. But you don't have to be a religious person to see that friendships are essential to a healthy life. So to need good friends is also simply profoundly human. It's simply profoundly human. Genesis 2:18, you know the verse well. The scripture says that it's not good for human beings to be isolated. Yes, we value solitude, stillness. We need time alone. But to live alone, to live in isolation from meaningful connection to one another, is not a recipe for human flourishing. So some quotes from the Barbara Bradley Haggerty book, Life Reimagined. She said, in the most basic of ways, friends increase one's lifespan. Harvard researchers found that people who were not connected to others were 3 times as likely to die over the 9-year study period as those who had strong social ties. Friends extend one's lifespan. She said, in fact, people with healthy lifestyles and no friends died earlier on average than those who smoked, drank, and shunned exercise, as long as the latter had friends. So there's so much interesting conversation these days about how in the scientific American mind, the primary lens that we look through is technical. And we think about that in all sorts of issues, like diet, right? It's like the Mediterranean diet. That's where, people are living the longest. These people live to be 100, so drink 1 glass of wine and, olive oils and, vegetables and these sorts of things. We look through the lens of science, and science can be very helpful to us, but we ignore the fact that all of that is going on in an extraordinarily communal culture. It's not just that 1 glass of wine is good, it's that 1 glass of wine amongst friends is good. If you're into the workout world, there's all this stuff going on about ice baths, jumping in cold water and how that dopamine hit. And there are people that are doing that out there. It's like filling up their bathtub with ice and sitting in it for 15 minutes in the morning because it stimulates your being, and all kind of interesting things physiologically happen to your body. And some of those things are true. But the reality is that the Nordic world from which this practice came, it was like a communal ritual. The welcoming of a new season into our lives by diving into the water together and celebrating with our friends and welcoming the season that's ahead. We are so blind to the reality that our lives are to be knit to one another. This is also from the Barbara Bradley Haggerty book, but she's quoting University of Virginia researcher named Jim Cohn saying that having friends prompts you to turn off stress hormones, lower your blood pressure, reduce your level of inflammation, boost your immune system. Someone over here was talking about ease, that there is not just an emotional ease, but a holistic ease in being with friends that is healing to the human person. And she said Harvard researchers tested and retested the memories of people in their 50s and 60s over 6 years. And they found that socially active people had less than half of the memory loss of those who were less socially engaged. I was reading this on retreat when my dad had been diagnosed with dementia and was beginning his decline. And I picked up my phone and thought, I got to call my friend, and start making some appointments with them. There are probably other things that we could do to sustain our memory, but these Harvard researchers are saying that one of those things should be to form meaningful bonds. But there are challenges in midlife. There are also challenges vocationally to forming meaningful friendships. There's some Eugene Peterson fans in the room, I believe. Peterson said, those of us who choose to remain in the church, for the most part, don't find ourselves in very propitious company. A Eugene Peterson word. Someone tell us what propitious means? Nobody can? Favorable, kind of a favorable thing. The impoverished Christian community in which many of us find ourselves makes for a lonely business. And then Peterson ends with what I think is a very sad and sobering comment. He says, I learned very early that loneliness was unavoidable. Loneliness was unavoidable. So I wonder if we could take a moment before I go on and just talk about, in your perspective, to the extent that you resonate with some of what Peterson is saying here, what do you think some of the challenges of meaningful friendship are in your vocational life in this season? You don't have to share deeply personally if you want, but what's your observation? What have you seen in your own life or in the lives of others? Tyler.
Ted and I were talking yesterday at lunch, almost this sense in the life of pastoring that you're always kept at an arm's distance from people in the congregation, whether consciously or subconsciously. You're never allowed in.
Okay. So some sense of arm's distance. Yeah, maybe some of us feel that. Other things that...
running meetings, tending to other people, holding pastoral counseling sessions, by the end of the day, I'm like, I'm tired. Peace out. I don't have space and time to pour energy into friendships. That it's a real discipline.
Okay.
To guard your heart throughout the day, to have
You're
talking about the discipline of making time.
Yeah. So if you are an introverted soul, it's possible in a community building and nurturing effort to spend all your chips on things that are helpful to other people, and then just to feel like, yeah. And it's good to have, whatever you need to do to be recharged, but is there energy left over for the nurture of friendships? Anyone else?
The weight of responsibility and decision making can be isolating. You don't feel like other people can really understand what you're going through.
Yeah. So the weight of responsibility. And if you're an externally processing person, who would you talk to about the weight that you're feeling or the tension you feel in relationship to someone else without poisoning another set of relationships? So it's just on you and in you. I think sometimes there are gender things that go on. So it's like there's, the young female pastor on my team is like, it's just always awkward. Men in the church are attracted to her. So she's always wondering, is this safe? Can we really be can we be friends here? So there are all kind of questions out there about what are healthy male and female relationships, and what would wisdom dictate for us? Anything else? Let me talk about the kinds of friends that we might have. I'm interested in the reality that the literature on friendship is just so vast and extensive. So throughout human history, people keep writing about friendship. So in the ancient world, if you read that stuff, it's like Aristotle and Augustine are writing long treatises on friendship. And on into our current world. C.S. Lewis wrote about four loves. He wrote about friendship. Kierkegaard wrote about friendship. What is it that they are saying about how to form the most meaningful friendships? That's a big, huge topic. Let me just kind of name two values that I see that pose questions to us. One question is, in our relationships, to what extent we have declared a virtuous purpose. The Greek word is telos. Why are we here? To what end is this friendship? So, Aristotle is talking about friendships of utility. We're here to sell things. We're here to grow the church. We're here to do something outside of ourselves. Or there's friends that just hang out and get a drink together, or run together, or bike together. Or these days in my world, people are playing pickleball together. There's nothing wrong with any of those things. The pickleball experience is an absolutely fantastic experience, and I've met all kind of interesting people doing that. But one of the questions towards a more meaningful friendship is whether there's any kind of expressed virtue that is tied up in this relationship. To what extent is there an explicit virtue named along the way? And to what extent have we declared a commitment to one another? So there's all sorts of interesting observations we can make about the value throughout Christian history in vowing friendship, in saying that we are traveling together, that we are staying together in friendship for some period of time. So I think it's possible, as we think about these questions, to let it kind of give us a map of the kinds of relationships we have. Not to say that any of the relationships are superior or inferior to one another. There's might be a place for all of these kinds of friendships. But to say, like, what is the essence of what we might call a spiritual friendship? So briefly, if you had a relationship in which there was no express commitment and no express virtue, we're just kind of hanging out, that could be an extraordinarily pleasant relationship. So again, that's not to demean it, but it's just sort of, that is a buddy. If you had a relationship that is expressing a clear commitment, but no meaningful virtue, I don't know, it might be like your kid's club sports team. Now, I should be careful there because I know, some teams, they try to weave in sense of character and purpose, and so there are different kinds of things. But, it's also the case, I had a swimmer, in our family, and it's like, that's just a lot of commitment for something that is going away, at some point, that's like a lot of time for trying to shave off 0.2 of a second more. And it's like, what are we really doing here? I feel a little sad to have to say this, but there are relationships where there is a high ideal of virtue and very little commitment expressed. Sometimes many churches feel that way unless you're in some sort of new monastic movement where we are going to get together in the morning and the evening to pray. But, otherwise, it's increasingly the case in the United States that even our committed people are participating on Sunday morning or in their small groups half the time or 40% of the time or something like that. So high ideals, but not that much time together. That's a recipe, I think, for like a disheartening experience. I talked to one friend who pastored for many years and then stepped aside to be a freelance artist. And I said, what happened? Like, where did you go with this? And he just said, I don't want to be unkind to the people of the church. But the reality is that we keep talking about the great importance of all we're doing here. And the reality is, for the average person, it's about the fifth or sixth most important thing in their life. And what we're doing together doesn't really match what we're saying. There's too large a gap. I mean, Trevor was talking about role and soul in the individual. Maybe we could talk about in the world of the church as well. That we talk about our relationships being discipleship relationships, doing life together. We have all these little phrases, and it's like, yeah, you're not going to have that kind of transformation seeing one another once a month. Is mostly about catching up with one another and making sure that when you come to church, you at least know someone's name, something like that. And so I want to suggest that in the most technical of senses, a lasting spiritual friend is someone with whom we have articulated some kind of purpose and articulated some kind of commitment. Could be a long-term commitment, could be for this year, could be for 5, but it's to say, while we're here, let's be here, and let's prioritize this time. So these will all come to you if you like, take pictures of them if you don't want. So I'll just come back and share the brief story about my friends and then talk about other ways that it can look. So we became friends along the way organically just by being in fellowship and going on mission together. It all happened just by traveling together. We were all looking for Jesus and ended up finding one another in the midst of that. And then there was also then a moment of commitment and clarity about the virtue that we were seeking. So we had known one another for about 18 years. I was leaving InterVarsity staff. That's the campus ministry that we had all participated in. I felt genuinely called to leave, and the saddest thing about leaving was thinking, I don't know where I'm ever going to find another set of friends like this. I'm just going to have to hope that God would provide for me, and then we will see. So I went to my last staff meeting. We went out for a drink afterwards, and Jason, the guy in the red shirt, said, well, what if we stay together? What if even as we go in different directions, we make a commitment, a covenant to remain friends through thick or thin for the rest of our lives? Now, we had known one another for 18 years, so it wasn't like, hey, you want to meet together for the rest of our lives? It was very organic to us. This was in a season, I guess, which never ended, but it was in a season where there were some high-profile wipeouts for Christian leaders, moral failures and all this kind of stuff. And because of that, and because of a sense in which we all had intentions of remaining in ministry leadership, the declaration of virtue in that moment, sitting around having drinks together, was, let's help one another finish well. Let's help one another finish well. And we said, well, what would that, that was actually a technical term from a seminary class we had taken together from a leadership professor named Bobby Clinton. He did all this research on finishing well and how most Christian leaders don't finish well. Sometimes the moral failure, sometimes it's just people plateauing and losing their way, losing a sense of edge, or in the language of T.S. Eliot, losing a sense of intensity. We're just downshifting in life to a more relaxed season. Now I'm getting older, so a relaxed season ahead, I'm going to totally welcome. So it's not about like running fast, but maintaining a sense of clarity about who I am and what I'm for in the cycle of grace, what my significance is, and to whom should I be offering that significance in this season, okay? So it's not about doing more, running faster. It's about being clear and then judicious, offering myself according to how it is that God has given himself to me. So our agreements in that space, we just thought, let's meet together once a year, no matter what. We will never let busyness overwhelm. Let's go away for 4 days together. And we developed a rhythm of talking about our souls and talking about our families and talking about our vocations. That's the rhythm. Each person gets like half a day. Unpack all your stuff. Let people ask questions. We made an agreement in that space to ask one another the questions that no one else might ask. I think that might be one of the isolating things. Who would really ask us the questions of our lives that are kind of in the stuff of our lives? Let's do that for one another. We made a commitment to be clear about our needs. So our language about that was like raising the red flag when you need help. You know, it's possible in groups where it's like, well, I'm kind of struggling in my marriage, it's not going that great. And it's like, what are you really saying? Like, are you saying that's like, well, it's a bumpy time and it's kind of, you know, we'll get through it? Or is it like, we are in trouble in this space? And so we'll ask one another that question, like, can I ask for a clarification? You know, what color flag are you raising here? And then we made a commitment that when one of us moves to visit that person in their new location and to have a covenant group gathering there, it was just kind of a fun way to express a commitment to stay current with one another. So that was awesome, you know, because one guy like moved to Scotland and was like, covenant group is meeting in Scotland. And I'm not really a spender, but it's like I've committed to spending this money because that's what we're doing in this place. And we did that, and it was a very, very fun, very meaningful way to stay with one another. And the fruit of our being together over the years has really been wonderful. So I am confident that, you know, marriages have been sustained in this rhythm of being. The vocational clarity has come when it's time to let go of something, or when it's time to, you know, put your nose to the grindstone and suffer for the sake of the gospel. Very difficult to figure out on our own sometimes.
Brad,
Yeah.
what were the questions you guys had at your retreat this year?
The categories that we were talking about had to do with what is the health of your soul. So the soul, the family, you know, and, you know, that would be just kind of your household relations that work for single people as well. And then vocation. What vocational questions are you asking? So I want to send you out in pairs to walk and chat about this. But before I do, I feel like it's important for me to give you at least a couple of other pictures. Sometimes when I talk about this group of friends, people think, wow, that's really great. Some of you I know from chatting with you have sets of friends like this, and you know, sometimes it's been laid aside and you're thinking about reviving it. Sometimes it's current and you think, mine's better than yours, you know. But there's always some number of people when I talk about this that feel like, I wish I had that and I don't know how to get that. So, you know, that's sort of the highest of bars, and I share about it because it's been so meaningful and influential in my life. But there are other kinds of what I think of as spiritual friends in our context. So, you know, one would be that there are 2 other couples that my wife and I meet with. And our kids have graduated from college, and we find ourselves in a different season of life. At Fuller Seminary, they have an initiative where they call that the third. You know, what are you doing in this season of your life? There's so much energy in the second third about launching your kids and paying for college and giving blood so you get a little more money to pay for the, and then one day you find yourself and that's all done. And now what? At least in Silicon Valley, people, like, the cultural momentum is like cashing out, selling your home, and going living somewhere else in a larger space where you can travel the world and golf and play pickleball and just sit on your butt and, whatever. And it's like, so there are two couples that we're meeting with where we just said, let's travel together through this season and try to clarify what it means for us to be disciples of Jesus in this next season of our lives. What do we want to give ourselves to? What is the further intensity? What does it mean for us to grow deeper in relationship with Jesus in this season? What is the purpose of our lives? So there is that. There's a friend that I have a Monday afternoon phone call with most Mondays, every Monday really, unless I'm out of town. And I suppose, there's a way in which we have a clear commitment. Monday afternoon at 1, I'm going to call him. He's in the East Coast, so at the end of his day, we walk and talk. Our expression of a virtue, a purpose for our gathering, is just sort of evolved into being. There's just enough relational enjoyment that it's enough to have a call. But even in the midst of that, I think both of us would say that the question that we are most often asking one another in the midst of the contours of our lives is, what is nurturing your sense of belovedness? Or what is disturbing your sense of belovedness? So it's not all that rigid. So it's not like we talk about that the whole time. It's not like we even talk about that every time. So there are conversations where we're talking about all kinds of things. That's the nature of friendship as well. But there is sort of an explicit agreement that we've developed along the way that this is the central question of our journey. And it's been really wonderful to talk about because things happen in life. So, there was one call, about, 6 or 8 months ago, and he said, hey, can we cut to the chase and move on from the small talk? I was talking with my son just yesterday who told me that they were changing genders, and I thought, let's go through this together. We have challenging things in our lives, and it was personal for him. And then he wondered if he could keep his job because there's a high-profile ministry role. How do we pay attention to our sense of belovedness in that? So, those would be kinds of pictures of ways to say, what is this relationship about? So I'm going to put you in pairs right after I just summarize with some quotes. They're in your notes already. Barbara Bradley Haggerty said, I once believed having friends was a luxury. Now I know that losing friends can be lethal. Feeling lonely and isolated, no matter what your age, will shorten your life as much as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It destroys your body as effectively as alcoholism. It is twice as lethal as obesity. Barbara Bradley Haggerty is saying, this is not optional stuff for people who are interested in being healthy human souls. It really is a fundamental necessity in our lives. Going back more ancient, Anthony the Great, the Egyptian monk, said our life and death are with our neighbor. I love the simplicity of that. Our life and death are with our neighbor. Elred of Rivaux in the 12th century, the Cistercian monk, I find these words poetic and meaningful. He said, no medicine is more valuable, none more efficacious, none better suited to the cure of all temporal ills than a friend to whom we may turn for consolation in times of trouble and with whom we may share our happiness in times of joy. To have a meaningful spiritual friend is to have medicine for the deepest part of who we are. So we should seek it and find it and then take that medicine. Elred also said, a faithful friend is the medicine of life and the grace of immortality. It's how it is that we arrive at the destiny that God is leading us into. So the question then is, as you travel from this space, with whom will you travel? You will, of course, travel with one another in your small groups, at least virtually so. Maybe there are other people here that you would want to connect with apart from your small group experience. Or maybe there are people in your own life that you just feel like it would be good to honor these friendships by feeding them and giving them their due attention. Since this session has been on the topic of friendship, rather than sitting alone, I want to encourage you just to take a walk with someone who is next to you here. We have 25 minutes at this point, and just say, what struck you in this? And is there some step you might ponder taking to nurture a more life-giving friendship circle in your world? That action could be something as simple as saying thank you to the people who are there. So if you have a circle of spiritual friends with whom you are already gathering, you might just text them today and say, I just want you to know how much I value your friendship. And when we get together, how much I receive in being in your presence. And I'm so glad for you, and I just wanted to thank you for being that in my life. It's possible that you have a circle of friends that are very meaningful to you, but you don't have a very regular meeting with them. And you might suggest to your friends, would you consider a more regular meeting? Maybe in just this next year. I'm going through a program called Next Frontiers, and I'm thinking about where my life is headed, and it would be super meaningful to me to just have a place of bonding and sharing. Would you be up for that? If it's the case that you are, I don't know, it's possible to be here and be in some sort of friendship crisis. The crisis of realizing that I've been wounded along the way. I've been betrayed along the way. I have people in my life, but they're at a certain distance, and it's not them keeping me at arm's length, but it's me. I haven't figured out how to let my guard down. And if that's the case, maybe it would just be a place to begin to ponder, who could I ask for prayer in that space?